Wow, hello, good evening. Nice to see you all here. Wow, we have filled this house. Thank you for coming out tonight. You're in for a real treat. My name is Doug Stanton. I'm one of the people of NWS, and it's really a joy to see you back here in this room together. I hope you don't mind. I've just taken my mask off for a minute just so you can hear me. I think I see, hi Lisa. Lisa Thavet, she's on our board. Everyone, a big round of applause for Lisa Thavet. She also does improv. I'll have to give out your website later, Lisa. A few things. I'm here there's a table out in the lobby, and I want to call your attention to it because we have lots of parents and lots of young authors in the audience tonight. And it's Born to Read, and their table is just as you walk in, and they're promoting literacy from basically birth to the fifth grade, not fifth grade, but 5 years old. And do stop at that table and take a look at the offerings that Mary Kay Archer and Karen have out there. They serve 5 counties, and as you know, medical professionals feel that learning to read early is one of the best indicators of later success in school. So I wanted to give a shout out to them, and I want to also talk about upcoming Front Street Writers opportunities. Do we have anybody in the audience who is a Front Street Writer? I can't see all of you. Do we have anybody who is a parent of a Front Street Writer or a grandparent? We got to get some hands raised in this audience. What is going on here? Front Street Writers is a wonderful program for free, offered by you, our community, and your generous donations. Angeline, in fact, spoke last night at the Traverse Area District Library to a group of high school students about her craft. Fascinating discussion. It was free. We have more stuff on the way. I do want to point out that we have a new class starting in writing, and the deadline for registration is January 16th. So will you check that out on the way out? I'll be in the lobby if you want to talk about it, but I can't stress enough that this is a dynamic, worthwhile opportunity for the young people in your life who have an interest in storytelling. And we're going to hear a lot about that tonight with Holly T. Bird and Angeline Boulley. Thank you. A couple of really important thank yous to begin with. First off, to tonight's sponsor, which is Dr. Sarah Bergsma Orthodontics. Thank you, Dr. Bergsma, for supporting this evening of conversation. I also want to thank our sustaining sponsor, Cordia, who's been with us quite a while, and our fall season sponsor is West Shore Bank. The arts benefactor sponsor is the Northwest Michigan Arts and Culture Network, and we have media partners in Interlochen Public Radio and the Record Eagle. And thanks to the volunteers who politely asked you for your vaccination card when you walked in. It's like going to a rock concert, right? You had to get that swipe on the wristband. And the staff, board members, and donors, thank you all for your support. As well, the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs and the National Endowment for the Arts. I want to now bring out Jillian Manning, the Executive Director of the Writer Series. I think she might also tease a little bit about the upcoming season, and she'll introduce our guests, but I just want to come out here and take a moment to see you and to thank you for being here. There's a great new season coming. I'm not kidding. It's really good, and we're going to kick that off in January. All right, good night. Warm welcome for Jillian Manning, please.
Hi, everybody. So good to see all of you here. Thanks for braving the snow. And thank you to everybody watching from home on our live stream produced by Traverse Area Community Media. It's awesome to be able to reach people wherever they are. So before we dive into our introductions, I did want to acknowledge that tonight's event is taking place on lands cherished and maintained for generations by the Anishinaabe, the indigenous people of this area. We wish to recognize those whose traditional land we are gathered on today as the land on which the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians have resided for thousands of years. To recognize the land as an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory you reside on, and a way of honoring the indigenous people who have been living and working on the land for time immemorial. It is important to understand the long-standing history, that has brought us to reside on this land and to seek to understand our place within this history. We thank the Anishinaabe people for allowing us to be here today. Doug did some wonderful thank yous as well to our other sponsors. Thank you to everybody who has made this possible. I have to give a special shout out to Dr. Sarah Bergsma. For those who know me, you know that's my mama. So I can attest, she does a great job with teeth. I won Best Smile in high school, so go get your aligners, your braces, whatever you might need. She's the lady to do it. And then, as Doug also kind of gave you guys the heads up, we will be announcing our winter-spring season next week. If you are a friend of NWS, you've already gotten a sneak peek of that, but we'll be announcing to everybody else. And we are adding a couple more authors for the friends that have seen those first batch. But I will tell you, let's see, we have a U.S. Poet Laureate coming. We have one of your favorite screenwriters coming. We have a Harvard professor, and a whole host of other very talented, wonderful folks. So stay tuned for that coming to your inboxes on Monday morning. Now, to introduce our special guest for the evening, Angeline Boulley is the Breakout Michigan Author of the Year, and her book, Firekeeper's Daughter, was an instant bestseller. It was named a Time Magazine Best Book of All Time in the Young Adult category, and her book has only been out for 9 months, so that is the impact it has made. And today, it was named the Goodreads Choice for Young Adult Literature. So she is racking up all the awards, and they are very well deserved. The book is part Nancy Drew, part coming of age, and follows a biracial Native American teen who must root out the source of a new lethal drug that's corrupting her community. It is a young adult novel, but don't let that scare you off. As a young adult at heart forever, a Peter Pan kid, I loved it, and it's a fantastic page turner that will keep you reading all through the night. The book is set a little bit north of here in Sault Ste. Marie, so for those that have been, you will see some familiar landmarks, and it beautifully weaves threads of Indigenous culture throughout the entire story. If you haven't already, there are copies that are signed out there in the lobby. Be sure to pick some up before you go. And Angeline will be in conversation tonight with Holly T. Bird, a lawyer and the co-executive director of Title Track, which is a local nonprofit dedicated to clean water, racial equity, and youth empowerment. Holly's history of community activism and environmental and Indigenous issues make her the perfect conversation partner for tonight, and you will see these two have already become great friends. Thank you again for being with us. Thanks for coming and working those snow tires probably for the first time, and please join me in welcoming Angeline Boulley and Holly T. Bird.
Night, and we have with us the most wonderful, wonderful person, and I'm so pleased and happy to be here today. And just to read a little bit, I have some prepared things, but this is a long list I'm going to have to read you, so I'm using notes. The Firekeeper's Daughter is a novel that tells the story of Daunis Fontaine, a biracial, unenrolled tribal member of the Ojibwe descent. The book details her experience as a college student, dedicated family member, friend, and witness to a horrible murder. She goes undercover for the criminal investigation of the murder, and the journey that ensues is absolutely thrilling, and I hope you've all gotten to read it, if not once, but twice. And the thing about this book that's really unique and special, besides being from one of our Indigenous authors, whom we know it's a very small pool, but the book debuted as an instant #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. It's a Time Magazine Best YA Book of All Time selection, Amazon's Best YA Book of 2021 so far, the Goodreads Choice Award of 2021 of Best Young Adult Fiction, that just happened, congratulations, and a 2021 Kids Indie Next List selection. My list goes on, hold on. An Entertainment Weekly Most Anticipated Books of 2021 selection, a Pop Sugar Best March 2021 YA book selection, and just some quotes, or one important quote, one of this year's most buzzed about young adult novels from Good Morning America. And it's soon to be adapted for a Netflix for TV series with President Barack Obama and Michelle Obama's production company called Higher Ground. So And if that isn't enough, Angeline is a tribal member of a tribe here in Michigan, one of our very own. And I think that's really important and really unique. I think as we sit here on Anishinaabe territory, we can celebrate that one of our own has made that journey and has made that success. So everybody, please welcome for me, Miss Angeline Boulley. So preliminaries, I'm gonna ask you a few. Please tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up, and what were some of your biggest influences?
Oh, okay. Let me first start. Bonjour, Anin, Angeline Boulley, Nadishnakas, Makwadodam, Bawating, and Ojibwe, Chimagwech. So I'm Angeline Boulley, Bear Clan from the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. My family comes from Sugar Island, and I'm just so honored to be here tonight. This is a dream come true. I grew up in Southwest Michigan, right on Lake Michigan. My dad was a truck driver, and I grew up like kindergarten through high school in a little town called New Buffalo. And I actually, when I graduated high school, I swore I would never go back. And last year, during COVID, I moved back. So I live a block away from my parents. Every Wednesday we get together for dinner and Yahtzee, and I'm loving it. I'm really, really loving it.
And she forgot to mention that our house has a view of Lake Michigan.
My house now has a view of Lake Michigan, yes.
It's so beautiful.
Authorship has its privileges, yes.
I'm so glad. What were some of your biggest influences growing up?
Well, so my dad was a truck driver, and he is the most well-read man I've ever met. My mother did not drive, so we lived in a small town, and every Saturday, my mom was like a mama duck with the little ducklings behind her. We would have our little tote bags with us, and we would go to the public library every Saturday. And we would, return our books and then load up with our next week's selection. And so I really credit my parents for just that love of learning, that love of reading whatever you wanted to read. And so I, of course, I read Nancy Drew, I read the Hardy Boys, I read the Dana Girls, a book by Robert Cormier called I Am the Cheese. I read that in elementary school, and that book is dark. And I think it opened my eyes of like, whoa, like the world is not all shiny. Stories don't always have a happy ending. And I just remember that book making a huge impact on me. And so, yeah, Robert Cormier.
Fantastic. And do you have any Indigenous authors that you are inspired from?
Oh, gosh. I'm inspired, of course, Louise Erdrich. And the most unusual thing that happened to me during this publication year is the National Congress of American Indians hosted a virtual event, and it was celebrating my book. Secretary of the Department of the Interior, Deb Haaland, gave an introduction. Senator Debbie Stabenow gave an introduction, and I was in conversation with Louise Erdrich, who is my idol, and we were there to talk about my book, not hers. And so that was like a total mind, completely, I still can't believe that night actually happened. I think there's a really cool picture that's online of me, like with my hands up to my face, and I look like I'm like crying and in disbelief. And on the other screen is Louise Erdrich holding up my book and talking about it. So yeah, that was incredible. There are a lot of Indigenous authors that I love. One of my most recent loves is Cherie Demeline. She's a First Nations author, and her book, The Marrow Thieves, I would say is like in my top 3 favorite books of all time. And it's set in a near future where the world is experiencing environmental climate, it's a dystopian novel, and humankind has lost the ability to dream, and only Indigenous people can still dream. And so they're being rounded up and put into schools so that their bone marrow can be harvested. And it's rooted in the past, in our Indian boarding schools. And so, yeah, she, I think, is a phenomenal author, and her book just, what makes it so believable is that it's rooted in history.
Thank you so much. It makes me feel really good seeing a successful Indigenous author lifting up other authors, in our community. Mm-hmm. And yes, we do crush on each other, believe it or not. There's not that many of us, but we crush on each other.
Yeah, I do.
Why do you think that's important to uplift other Indigenous authors?
Because it's not a zero-sum game. My success doesn't come at another Indigenous author's expense. A rising tide lifts all boats. And so for as long as people are asking me for authors that I adore, I will continue to promote Darcy Little Badger, Erica T. Worth, Cherie Demeline, Cynthia Leidick Smith, Marie Burtenow, Kelly Jo Ford, just incredible authors that are out there. We've always had incredible storytellers. It's just that we didn't always get the publishing deals. And so I'm hopeful that, publishing is a business. And so for as well as Firekeeper's Daughter has done, I hope that it encourages other publishers to take a chance on another Native author who has a great story to tell about their community.
Thank you so much for that, Miigwech. And to me, that's the ultimate in gratitude is to do that. So thank you for also being a genuinely nice person. Switching fields here, you have a professional background as a grant writer, and then also as a director of the Office of Indian Education for the U.S. How has this unconventional training helped you as a novelist?
Well, I had a moment of imposter syndrome. I think I was at my first writing conference or writers conference, and everyone was talking about which MFA program they had been to, which is Masters of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. I had not been. And I think sometimes, people talking about, oh, I did a fellowship at this. Oh, I did this retreat. Oh, I did this, And for someone who I felt completely outside of that process, and then I thought, wait, I am a storyteller. It's just that the stories I've told have been in the form of grants that I've written for every single tribal community I've ever worked for. And whether the grant was for $500 or $5 million, every grant wanted to know, who was my community? What issue did we want to address? How did we want to address it? When would we know we were successful? And why should we be trusted with the funding? And so when I realized that my storytelling was as a grant writer, and that I could create a compelling narrative in 40 pages or less, plus attachments. It really helped me overcome that imposter syndrome thing that can kind of derail us, that my training as a writer was unconventional. It was different from anything I'd ever heard any writer talk about, but that didn't make it any less valid. And so I challenge people who want to write, think about the strengths that you have. Rethink your experiences, because I bet you bring more to the table than what you give yourself credit for.
Thank you. Now, in previous interviews, you talk about the 10-year-long journey that this book took. And can you tell us a little bit about your process?
Well, honestly, I had the idea when I was 18, which was not 10 years ago. But I had the idea when I was 18 because a friend of mine went to a different high school, told me about a new boy. She thought he would be my type. I was optimistic, but it turned out he was not. He didn't play sports, and that was all that I was about. So I never met him, and it turned out that there was a huge drug bust in their community, and it turned out that the new guy had been an undercover narcotics officer. And so overactive imagination, me, was like, what if he had gone to my school? What if we'd been in classes? What if we'd liked each other? What if he needed my help? And then this kernel of an idea that has stayed with me since I was 18 years old was, why would some undercover investigation need the help of an ordinary 18-year-old Ojibwe girl? That's how it started. When I was, and I ended up, I was the first person in my family to go to college, and then I worked for the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe, then I worked for the Pokagon Potawatomi band, and then I worked for my own tribe in Sault Ste. Marie. And by then, I was married, I had 3 kids, and I think I went through a midlife crisis, honestly. When I was 44, I realized that maybe there's more sand in the bottom of the hourglass than in the top, and if I haven't accomplished the dreams that I have always told myself I would do, I'd better get cracking. And so I decided I was going to write that story that had been in my mind since I was 18 years old, that I had been working out the puzzle pieces all of those years. Like, what if it was a drug investigation that was on federal land? What if it was on a reservation? What if the drug was something that had a recipe that could be manipulated? And what if it was manipulated with something that had a cultural component? And what if that 18-year-old Ojibwe girl was strong in chemistry and knew her cultural teachings and her language and about traditional medicines, plants that we use for healing? She actually would be the ideal undercover informant to help with a drug investigation. And with that, at age 44, I decided to start writing this book. And it took 10 years. A lot happened during those 10 years. But I reached a point where I thought, okay, I've got a draft that I really believe could get published.
Great. And what is the difference, or what became the difference between draft 1 and the final version?
Draft 1 was horrible. I don't know what I was going through at the time. It was definitely not young adult. I've had people who are like, I will pay money for that, because, yeah, it went to some places that were not young adult. But I would say that the beginning of the book, the ending of the book, and one of the villains has always remained constant. But through maybe 8 major drafts, major rewrites, the story gained layers. Because although the original story was this external plot about an ordinary Ojibwe girl pulled into this drug investigation, the more that I looked at the experiences of the students that I was working with in different tribal communities in Michigan and my own struggles as a light-skinned Ojibwe person in Michigan and the struggles of my children to justify or validate who they were as Indigenous people, I thought, okay, it's dressed up like a mystery thriller, but at its heart, it's a story about identity and claiming your identity as an Indigenous person and finding your place in the world and specifically in your own tribal community. And I thought, that's the story.
Great, thank you. And you were very successful at that. And you opened up so many doors with that, because that story runs through many Native people. Many Indigenous people have that same struggle. They're unenrolled, they grew up in white culture or not, they're not sure of where they are.
Right.
And I think that addressing that, as well as the gutsy move of bringing in the medicine along with the drugs, did you get any response to that?
No. I got more response from bringing in the language and not including a glossary. My publisher wanted me to include a glossary, and I pushed back, and I said, no, if I write the story, I want the reader to figure out the meanings of the words through context, and I don't want them flipping back and forth to a glossary. And thank you. And I'm really proud of that decision, and I hope that it inspires more people who are writing and including their language, that no, we don't have to center it to somebody else. Just write the story, write the language, and have it, figure it out.
Right. And how ludicrous does it seem that we would have to tailor the Anishinaabeg language to a glossary for people living on Anishinaabeg land, right? I challenge all of you. Go through your book and learn those words.
And that's where the audiobook really comes in too, is that the audiobook is narrated by Isabella Starr LeBlanc. I was able to pick her. I was able to listen to all of the audio, the narrator audition samples, and the instant I heard her, she is Dakota, she's from Minneapolis, and she's a stage actress. This was her very first audio audition. And the instant I heard her, I thought, she sounds exactly the way Daunis sounds in my head. And then she had the Granny June, she had those cadences that felt so familiar. And so if you want to experience that, I really encourage you to do the audiobook of it.
Yeah, there's a beautiful, some people call it a reservation accent. And I know we could both lapse into it right now. I didn't grow up on the reservation, but we know enough people or have enough family members. And it's not even just to this area, because you can hear it similarly in different places, whereas my people, I'm Pueblo, they actually have a little southern to it. And but it's a real soft and gentle way of talking. But I do want to get to one thing. You had mentioned your publisher. Now, you got an amazing 2-book deal with Macmillan, correct? And it's virtually the golden ticket of the publishing world. And my question is, so what parts have lived up to the fantasy of that golden ticket, and which parts are something different than that you hadn't really considered?
Okay, so I always knew it was a great story, and I always had faith that it was going to be published by a Big 5 publisher. I I just had that faith. But the day of the book auction, I was working at the U.S. Department of Education, and the 12 publishers, the imprints that were interested in my book, they submitted their initial bids, and I had an agreement to call my agent at lunchtime, and we were going to talk over all of the offers and pick the top 5. And then they would be invited to submit their best and final offer by 3:30 that day. At 1:30, my agent called me and said, "Can you talk?" And I thought, well, it's not the agreed upon time. And so, but I've known from my agent that if she asks me to talk, I want to take that call. So I went into the stairwell because that was the only place I could get a signal. Darn federal buildings. And she told me what the best and final offer was from Macmillan for a 2-book deal. And we spent the next 5 minutes saying, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God," like to each other, like back and forth. That was the entire call. So, yeah, this experience is beyond anything I ever could have imagined. I knew it was going to be a great story. I had hopes it was going to be published, but to have it be the lead title of a Big 5 publisher, and to have the film rights acquired by the Obamas, to have Reese Witherspoon pick it up, and to be interviewed by Robin Roberts on Good Morning America, like, these are not the things that I thought of when I dreamt about how's my book going to land. And I am glad, because the reality exceeding your dreams, how fantastic is that?
Yeah, I'm thrilled for you. An Instagram reader, Debbie Machilko Florence, posted, "Okay, I'm not Indigenous." We hear this a lot. But this quote from Firekeeper's daughter resonates with me so much. "It's your identity, but it gets defined or controlled by other people." This hits home for so many, myself included. How can you tell me, or can you tell me how this has been a theme in your life and how exploring it in this book has affected you?
Well, I mean, growing up, I always knew I was Ojibwe. My dad grew up speaking the language. He was raised by his great-grandmother, who only spoke Ojibwe. So that was his first fluent language. And then when us kids came along, he decided that he wasn't going to teach us the language. And I think he made a loving decision, because being Native American in Sault Ste. Marie in the 1940s and 50s, it was a really rough place to be identifiably Native. So I understand that. It just, can you go back to your question?
Yeah, absolutely. How has the theme of exploring your identity and how it defines you and how other people define it for you, how did that affect you while you were writing this book?
Well, even though my dad didn't teach us the language, he couldn't help not being Ojibwe. So we grew up knowing we were Ojibwe and doing certain things, and then realizing, wait, when people are at funerals, they don't always put tobacco in the casket. Like, why is it that we do that but nobody else does? And different things where I think my dad thought, okay, if I don't teach them the language, they won't get hurt. But he couldn't help being an Ojibwe man who had certain beliefs, and those beliefs, did resonate with us. And so, Yeah.
And did all that come up for you while you were writing the book? Was that something that you could feel into that character and into the theme of the story?
I think it was something I more came to accept when I first started working in tribal communities, when I first started working for the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe in Mount Pleasant. And I was like kind of taken under the wing of a couple of sisters and some other strong Anishinaabe who just really showed me what a strong Ojibwe woman could be. And I think it was then that I started making sense of why my dad hadn't taught us the language and why we were still Ojibwe, even though he had thought he was protecting us. There was something inherent about it that we still were.
Mm-hmm. But Daunis knew some of the language, right?
Yeah, so Daunis started out a lot like me. I would say like my first draft or two, she was me. And then it wasn't until later drafts that I gained confidence that she could have different interests. I've never played hockey a day in my life, but she played 4 years on the boys varsity team at Sioux High. And so it was kind of as the drafts got deeper and she became more independent, she was different from me. Mm-hmm. And I actually resonate more with Aunt Teddy. Okay. There are other characters in the book that I resonate much more closely than with Daunis. Originally, she did start out just like me, a girl who has an Ojibwe dad, a non-Native mom, a grandmother who did not care for Native people.
Yeah. And what did you identify with Aunt Teddy?
With Aunt Teddy, oh gosh, just that badass, like
yes.
You know, that person who's gonna look out for people in their community and like call people on their BS and just like, you know, no, you will not try that on that. Like I will show, you know, I will raise the curtain and show you. Yeah, just that a woman who has lived and endured struggles and hardships and losses, but still believes in love and community and family, and I think that's what Aunt Teddy is.
Great. And go ahead. I heard a clap.
Please.
Why is the story of Daunis and her community important for our youth? Why is telling that story important for our youth?
Because it's important. Books matter. I mean, representation matters. Books that our children and teens read, it matters. And if our children and teens can see books where they see themselves, that makes a huge difference. I was 18 years old before I ever read a book that had a Native American main character. And it wasn't until I read it that I thought, wait, why haven't I read a book with a Native main character? And that book was problematic, by the way. It played into some really bad stereotypes. And so it just, now I know that representation in literature is so important.
Thank you. And I'm so glad that we have your example in that too, because our youth can look at you and say, look, you know, Miss Boulley does it. I can be a writer like Miss Boulley. And that's so important. I resonate with that as well. We had talked earlier, and I had related that, you know, I had no interest in being a lawyer ever growing up. I was in art school. And until I met Indigenous attorneys, I didn't even know they existed. You know, and I was like, wow, this is what it's like. Right. And that's when I decided to go to law school. So I get that entirely. And I think it's absolutely true, especially with those positive, I mean, yes, we have the negative stereotypes, and we live those down all the time, don't we?
All the time. But
to have someone intelligent and trying to do the right thing, in her community, that's a whole nother thing.
Right, right. Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop wrote an essay in, I think it was the late 60s or early 70s, and she said about literature for children and teens, that they should serve as windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors by which kids can see themselves reflected, see into the lives of another person, another community, and actually step through a book into those lives. And Dr. Debbie Reese has built on that. So Debbie Reese operates the American Indians in Children's Literature blog, and she has built on that sentiment and said, some of those windows need curtains. And so when I was writing, I thought about what I wanted to share and what was appropriate for me to share. And so there were things that I held back. For example, ceremony, that was not appropriate for me to share. And I think that's why representation is important, because people who are from that community know, like, it's okay to share this, but not this. And maybe someone from outside the community would share the whole thing, or share only the trauma and not the joy and humor and the other wonderful things about the community.
Great.
So,
what was the response of your tribal community to your book?
it's been overwhelmingly positive. And I think the biggest reason for that, because I was anticipating some, blowback on it, but I think because I changed the name of the tribe and I fictionalized and took creative license with certain details, it's not so personal to my tribe. I wanted to be able to take the story where I wanted it to go. I wanted to talk about issues that I wanted to discuss that weren't necessarily relevant to my tribe, but might be to other tribes. And so, yeah, I think changing the name of the tribe and fictionalizing those details, I think that was probably the smartest decision I made, because people can love my story but not feel so personal about it. I felt like if I had done it about the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians, I didn't know how to tell a fictional story about an actual tribe without it feeling like a documentary or making some type of political commentary about my community. And so by fictionalizing it, it really helped take it somewhere else.
Great. And were people welcoming and generally just excited and happy for you?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
I know everybody I know is thrilled, so
Yeah.
I can.
They
speak
all
for
want
them.
to know if they can be extras in the
that's
Netflix
right.
series.
My daughter, by the way,
Right.
we had this conversation already. The book represents people on in a range of different levels, even though it seems to be focused on one small community. And that is the humanity that everyone can connect to, right? So where in your mind is the connection between all people the strongest in your book?
Well, the author James Joyce wrote, "In the particular, we find the universal." And I feel like my story is this story about one Ojibwe girl, but yet the themes about identity, grief, and justice are applicable beyond that.
It hits everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
And I love hearing from readers who aren't Native, who identify so closely with characters in the book. That part was like, wow, that's pretty neat. And so I think that's what I had hoped to do, was to write a story that would have the widest audience and would have people really feel for the characters and see themselves in characters, even though they were so specific to my tribal community.
Right. And how unifying is that? Right? Using
Yeah.
the word, the written word in your story to, and your culture, but it's helping people to come together in understanding.
Right.
Thank you. Firekeeper's Daughter is about many traumatic events that happen, but it's not necessarily a tragedy. So one of the notable quotes in the book is, "Wisdom is not bestowed. It is in its raw state. It is the heartbreak of knowing things you wish you didn't." Can you talk about how this is so?
I had many mantras while I was writing. One was that I write to preserve my culture, and I edit to protect it. And the other was I'm writing about trauma, but I'm not writing a tragedy. And I think that's where representation in literature is so important, because I feel like someone outside of my community might only see the trauma and wouldn't see the beautiful things that I see in my community. I see humor, resilience, I see our elders, I see strength, I see joy, I see connectedness, and those are the things that I really wanted to share with readers. And I felt like if someone outside my community were writing this story, they might only focus on the trauma, and they would miss so much.
Great. The noted Lakota poet Mark Tilson once wrote in one of his poems that every day is a good day to die for an Indian. And he's speaking to that constant tragedy, that constant trauma that we go through and that we're known for, right? Through the lens of colonization and oppression. Do you feel that it's important for our young people to break out of that?
Yes, because we are so much more than our trauma. Your ancestors gave you more than generational trauma. They gave you strength, they gave you humor, they gave you the language, they gave you teachings. All of these things can protect you, they can strengthen you, and they can give you those sturdy shoulders to go out in the world and do whatever you want to do.
When we were backstage, both feeling a little nervous, I turned to her and I said, "Gitchi Manadu and your Nokomis are behind you." That's the same thing. Your ancestors are behind you. Mm-hmm. That's one way that's a way that we care for each other.
Yes, and they gave you so much more than trauma.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. That's wonderful. A couple more of my favorite quotes from the book, and I wanted to bring these out. And this one is especially powerful to me. It's inaction is a powerful choice. And of course, I'm an activist, so I'm one of those people like, if you don't get it done, nobody else is going to do it, right? So where do you see that happening in your life? Not just in the book, but for everything.
Failing to make a decision is a decision. Choosing not to deal with something, it doesn't make that issue go away. It just means that you're not part of that, whatever's going to happen moving forward. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there was a character in the book, actually, it's Daunis's mom who says that. Mm-hmm. And she's kind of been trapped in this idealized version of this relationship that she had with Daunis's father and unable to move forward. And her realization that staying stuck there is a choice. And I think that's like a key moment for the mother.
Yes, thank you. And another quote that I have, and I think this is so important right now. kindness is something that seems small, Daunis, but it's like tossing a pebble into a pond and the ripples reach further than you thought. Why is that teaching so important?
I think it ties in with even our with the, thinking 7 generations ahead. There's something about like that it's not just you, it's not just here and now, it's what are the repercussions moving forward. And, we talk about 7 generations, and what that means is thinking about what decisions you make today that somebody, eons later, they're going to have to deal with it. And I love that. And I struggled to define what 7 generations was. And then I looked at our family tree, and it was my grandmother's grandmother, who I know as Grandma Toto, and then my grandchildren. That's 7 generations. Wow. So just thinking about that, yeah.
And I always think this is an amazing counterpart to the 7th generations. People think of that as being ahead, but I always like to remind people that you are somebody's 7th generation. You are the hopes and dreams of 7 generations before you. And you're also feeling the mistakes they made. So when we talk about kindness as something that seems small, but it's so big, especially in today's world, in today's society, looking forward and moving with kindness. And I know you to be a very kind person. That is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and do you feel that for our youth and our readers and anybody out here that should buy this book, what would your final words be about kindness in the face of today's society?
I think that the more that we know about each other, the more that we find those commonalities. Our differences really, our differences separate us, but those commonalities help bridge our humanity. And my the grandmother that I talk about, that Grandma Toto, she actually drove with her daughter to North Carolina to a group of linguists from Yale University, and there are tapes of her at this in the Smithsonian. She spoke her language and told stories, and her daughter interpreted them, and they're in a book that's called The Dog's Children, and on one page is the Ojibwe story, and on the other page is the English. And I think I come from storytellers. My father's great-grandmother traveled all this way to tell stories in our language that got preserved. And I am telling stories to people, to like this wider audience about what it means to be Ojibwe and what it means to be a young person coming of age, and how awesome, how wonderful is it that I get to do that. And so, and I'm named after her. Her name is Angeline Beaver, and Angeline Williams, and from Beaver Island. And so I just feel very full circle that I come from storytellers, and I appreciate all of you for buying the book, loving the book,
And coming out here tonight.
and for opportunities like this to talk about how important stories are.
Yes, thank you. And we're going to open it up now for some questions. We've got a couple of microphones, one here and one here. So if people would like to come over and ask a question, leave your masks on, please, for the benefit of those around you. And we welcome any questions at this point.
Hi, guys. Thanks for a wonderful conversation so far. We got a couple questions from the live stream audience. This is from Heather. She asks, your book is a suspenseful, fast read, but it's longer than most YA books. Can you talk about its length? Did you or your agent have any concerns about the length of the book, especially since you were a debut author?
Yeah, some rules are made to be broken. Honestly, I have a 4-book series in mind. I planted Easter eggs. Every single scene in Firekeeper's Daughter is there for a reason.
And, not for nothing, but Bohemian Rhapsody initially was too long. Do you remember that?
We have another question from Joy, and maybe this ties into what you just said. Daunis's mother was not easy to visualize or understand. Was this choice deliberate?
I think you'll learn a little more about Grace Fontaine in future books.
Any more questions? I know
Come
Mark
on up.
Wilson has a question,
I will
don't
answer
you?
anything except what Jamie's real name is. And and to answer the question I get asked most, I have not met the Obamas yet, but I am hopeful that someday I will.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Janelle Bamberg. I'm a Traverse City native. I am also a grant writer from Michigan, and I'm writing my first novel. And I was wondering if we could be friends.
I've never had anyone formally ask, but yes, I will be your friend.
I'm the one who's been following you on Instagram, tagging you. Yeah, that's me. I love the book, and I was actually up in Sault Ste. Marie. There's only one bookstore remaining in Eastern Upper Peninsula in Sault Ste. Marie. I'm forgetting the name at the moment.
Island Books and Crafts.
Yeah.
Les and Kelly Townsend are wonderful.
Yes, so that's where I picked this
He
up.
can hand sell my book to every single person that walks into that store.
I don't have any specific questions right now, but you are so inspiring, and this is the most important night of the year for me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Miigwech.
Miigwech.
Thank you. Come up to me afterwards, because we're friends now.
Okay. Oh, I see someone else
Yes.
with a beautiful ribbon skirt on. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Lita, Nuiswan Lita Bovine. I'm from Wisconsin originally. And I had a question. I'm kind of in the midlife crisis-y sort of point myself. And I've been considering like going back to school and that sort of thing. And just, was there any point in your decision, like, okay, I'm going to sit down and write this book, where you were just completely overwhelmed and thought, I can't do this, what am I doing? And if there was, how did you get past that?
I had my moments, but that story, that spark was just so strong that I felt like I needed to follow that. And it helped me through times when maybe I had other things going on and could have gotten lost. And it was like, no, I'm going to write this story. I will write this story. And it kind of, maybe it was like a beacon to me in my hard times.
Miigwech, Waiwanan.
Oh, miigwech.
Thank you. And we have someone else. Go ahead.
Anin, I'm Jenny Walter, and I just wanted to come up and tell you I'm from Sault Ste. Marie, and I'm a proud member of the Sioux Tribe of Chippewa Indians as well. And I want you to know that myself and all of my friends that grew up have just enjoyed this book, and tribal members, non-tribal members, we have shared it with everyone we know, and we appreciate you telling your story and just being out there and being a proud Native woman. So, miigwech.
Miigwech. Thank you so much.
Let's hear it for our Indigenous people showing up. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Sheila. I am an elementary and middle school principal out at Suttons Bay. We serve a population that's primarily Indigenous, and I heard some of these threads in your conversation around looking bigger than trauma and looking for those joys and that celebration and that strength. But I wonder if you have any kind of specific distilled advice for educators that are serving an Indigenous population. It's a big ask.
It is a big ask. Yeah.
Apologies for the big ask.
Yeah. Well, it's, I love being part of a collective community, and that's part of my identity. When I go back to Sault Ste. Marie, I talk about my dad, I talk about my grandma, and that connection with my family is an important part of establishing a connection with people. And I'm wondering if that's something that you can pursue with the families of the kids that you're with, is who are their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. That's just one part of it, but that's all I have for initial off the cuff.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Sure, go ahead.
This isn't for short people.
Yes, thank you.
It's all good. Hi, my name is Becky, and I'm also a Sioux Tribe member. And there we go. I'm a Sioux Tribe member that grew up not looking tribal, although my grandmother did look very Native American, but she hid her culture. You talked about, the 40s and it not being a time, I guess, to be Native. And so she always claimed that she was not Native, and she was French Canadian. So as I'm reading the story, I see the traditions, I see the Native traditions, they kind of come into my brain. Yes, I've heard a little of that, but because my grandmother didn't really pass those down to my mother, it wasn't really passed along to me. So I've had to go out into my own search and have found other family members and cousins that are much more involved in the tribe and able to give that cultural assistance to me. So my question to you is, have you seen a similarity in those instances in our tribe where people are, I guess, maybe given more of a fire to learn about their heritage and kind of have that renewed education and cultural sharing?
Yes, I think that when I wrote the book and knew that it would be published, I think that there was that part of, can my story help people find their way back to the tribe, to their community? And there's a part in the book about when we set an empty place at a feast, at a community feast, and we set that empty plate, and sometimes we fill that plate, but we set that for the people who aren't there that should have been. Mm-hmm. So we think about boarding schools, we think about people who were part of the 60 scoop, with social services that got adopted out, people who left because it was supposed to be more prosperous to go to the city to work. People who need help finding their way back to community. I guess I was hopeful that the book might help them to claim their identity and know that they're part of the community.
Sure, I can see that. I'll tell you right now, it has sparked that in me and hopefully others as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, miigwech.
Miigwech. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jane. How do you feel about non-Native American writers writing novels with Native Americans as main characters? And maybe not as a blanket statement, but do you think that it's possible for them to write good novels about Native American characters? Or have you read any or think that they shouldn't be writing such novels?
I encourage anyone who wants to write whatever they want to write, research and write whatever they want. There are things that I think that I worry that someone outside of my community might not grasp about my community, that I feel like I can portray better than someone outside my community, some of that nuance. But I think every writer is free to write whatever they want. I think it's for that writer to decide, am I the most appropriate person to write this story? Is my story taking away from other writers? I don't know. It's a really complicated topic. And I don't know that there's a clear, it's so subjective.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And hold on, we're going to get this gentleman over here. Are you ready?
Hi, my name is Paul Sinclair, and I want to thank you both for being here. This is so fantastic because it's not often that we get a chance to be in the company of Native Americans. And I want to go back a little bit with my background. I guess it must have been 1966, 67. I was talking to my grandmama, and I said, "What kind of Indian are we?" And she said, "Red ones." And I said, "But what tribe?" "I don't know." Well, in 1966, that's when I started doing research to find out as much as I could about us, because we don't read much about us in the textbooks. So through that quest, I remember I started teaching, and I thought, I teach, well, I was an art teacher. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. I taught art for 46 years. And never have I learned in college anything about Native American artists. So I'm teaching as much as I can learn. And I remember my department chair came in and said, I'm sorry, but you know how people feel about those people, and I don't want you teaching about Native Americans. I said, "You mean I can't teach about myself?" He says, "You can teach anything else." I said, "You mean European art is okay, Asian art is okay, but I can't teach Native American?" And he said, "Well, we don't want to hurt people's feelings." So what that did was just threw more fuel in the fire. And I became very relentless in regards to sharing it, because we need to know and we need to understand. And a good example that I use is, if you take in consideration Northwest Indians and the totem pole, for instance, those things are outdoors and they are there for hundreds of years. They don't have to worry about a storm and water messing it up. But if we look at regular two-dimensional type work, unless it's in a museum, how long is it there? So my point is, I appreciate you sharing, and I will continue to share with the public as much as I can, because we were here first. Thank you.
Miigwech, Mr. Sinclair.
Miigwech. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Lucy Bailey at Poso. I was wondering how you kept all the storylines so organized, especially with more books planned in the future. Everything just seems so thought out.
I have a hard time going to sleep at night because my mind keeps going, but I outline in Excel, so I use a spreadsheet, and that's how I organized Firekeeper's daughter. I had different columns for each character. I had a column for the cultural teachings, for each of the themes about identity, grief, and justice. And then each row was a scene. And so my spreadsheet is a work of art, because I know where every character is, even if they're not on page. I know what they were doing at that time. So yeah, I just, for some reason, that brings order to my chaos. And I just, that I use a spreadsheet to keep track of everything that I want to include in the story and when it needs to come out. Oh, yeah, I could be the poster child for organized chaos.
Great minds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a question that we've been asking a lot of our authors this season, and it comes from the Traverse Area District Library. And they ask, what role did libraries play in your youth and in your journey to become an author?
Libraries were everything to me. When I was young, I might have mentioned my dad was a truck driver. My mom didn't drive, so every Saturday we would take our little tote bags and follow my mom, and we'd walk to town and go to the library and fill up our books with whatever we wanted to read. And my mother never censored what we, if it was in our stack of books, we were good to go. And so I loved that. I felt like books were just this doorway to wherever I wanted to go. And so libraries were just this gateway to, I was the kid that would be, I would spend my allowance on batteries for the flashlight that I wanted to stay up at night after my sisters I shared a bedroom with my two sisters. And so I would be under the covers with the flashlight reading after everybody else went to sleep. And I think my mother knew it, and she was such a reader that she pretended she didn't know that that's what I was doing. But yeah, libraries were just, we were not a wealthy family. It's not like I could buy every book that I wanted to read. And so libraries were access to anything. I remember one time we visited my mom's grand aunt in Chicago, and she was really into those romance books, those little paperbacky kind of romance books, and she had a spare bedroom. And I'm telling you, this was like a scene out of Beauty and the Beast when Belle sees the library for the first time, and it's stacks from floor to ceiling of these romance books. And it was the whole entire, my mom's grand aunt must have spent her entire retirement on Harlequin romances. But the spare bedroom was this floor to ceiling extravaganza. And I just remember going into that room and being oh my God. And then she said, anything you want to take with you? And my parents had to stop me at 3 grocery bags full of books. because, yeah. So yeah, libraries, and then those people who buy books that, let you entertain yourself in these home libraries. That's the dream.
Yes, thank you. And shout out to the Grand Traverse Area Library. Yes.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
We have a fabulous library here. So we have another question over here.
Hello, my name is Amy, and I am just a huge reader, and I read everything. I love reading picture books. I love reading young adult books. Your young adult book is not the first book I've ever read, and I just like across the board. I don't have necessarily an avenue. I just like it all. But I am curious, you did mention that your first draft was not safe for young adults, so I'm curious, why did you decide to do it as a young adult book rather than as a regular book, adult book?
Because the themes about young adult are finding your identity and your place in the world or your community. That's very much a young adult theme. And I knew that's what the central story really was. The first draft, I don't know what I was going through, but it was really erotic. And I've had people who are like, I will pay you money for that version.
It was those Harlequin books.
Yeah, it was. I blame the Harlequin, the room of Harlequin romances. But yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Miigwech.
And Mark, do you want to go? Okay, this person, go ahead.
So hi, my name's Erin, and I would like to be your friend also.
Yes.
I'm also a member of the Sioux tribe,
Yay.
and I just devoured your book, like literally, like had I think the cover imprinted on my face at night because I'd fall asleep reading it and be like, I need to go to work tomorrow, but I can't stop reading this book, and just shared it with all my family members, and it's really helped me dig into my family history. And like, I think Daunis's dad, did he die in like a logging accident or something like that? And then I found out my great-grandpa actually died in a similar fashion in Canada, working in Canada. And so it's just really been a really amazing book to just kind of reignite my fire towards my family history. And it just feels really like at a DNA level, just like really loving like the earth and the land and all that sort of thing. And I just was curious, kind of your connection to the land based on your Ojibwe background. And then like also, like, did you have to do more research for like adding like the traditions and pieces of information that you put in the book, or was this more natural for you? And just also your connection to Sault Ste. Marie. Do you still have like a big presence there, connection there?
Yeah. So I grew up downstate, but every summer we would go back to Sault Ste. Marie and Sugar Island. My grandparents had a 2-story cabin that was like one of those tar paper shacks, but that's like my happiest memories are there. Like if I smell a campfire, it takes me right back there. So yeah, there's that part of Sugar Island that's just in me and just feels so right. When it comes to, I own the family property now on Sugar Island. So my dad was gonna sell it to my brother, my older brother, and I was like, hey, I'm the one that has this connection to the land. Why is it like patriarchy? Come on, like I'm the one that wants it the most. But yeah, my older brother kind of had the right of refusal. But I do own our family acres on Sugar Island. And there's just something about taking that ferry across that just makes me feel so connected to something bigger than myself. And I just feel like a connection to, my grandmother and her mom and, there's just something about the land that just makes me feel like I'm home. So I love that.
Thank you.
And I will say, the Sugar Island Powwow is the third weekend in July every year. And this past year, my agent and editor from New York, they had never been to the Upper Peninsula. They had never been to a powwow, but they flew from New York City to come. And oh gosh, and my dad and his cousins, my dad's one of those people who's like, ask me anything, I'll tell you anything I know, and what I don't know, I'll make up. And they just loved it. And,
Okay.
yeah. And the Friday before the powwow, I took my agent and editor around Sault Ste. Marie and around Sugar Island, and I showed them different scenes from the book, and I was like, this is where Daunis punches Jamie. This is where this happened. This is where this happened. And we filmed a few TikToks, and now my cousins want to do a Firekeeper's Daughter reality tour for the Friday before the powwow. So I'm just saying that if you want the full experience, there may be an option for you to come to Sault Ste. Marie.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. All right, Mr. Wilson.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Mangin Disnakas, Odawa Nishnabe and Dao, Mang Dodem, Kachiwe Kodong, Dojaba. It's nice to see you again. Thank you for coming. Met you last summer at Horizon Books, and you did a signing. And for those who had all asked you, my predecessors that asked you to be friends, I'll assure them that you are very personable and a woman of your word when you say that you will be in touch. What I'm getting at is a partner and I, we started a podcast earlier this year it's a guest-centric podcast that focuses on leaders and organizations in our community advancing positive change. One of our first guests early on in January was Miss Holly T. Bird from Title Track. Held the #1 downloaded episode for the whole year.
I did.
Oh, you did?
Wow.
Until Angeline was so kind to become gracious with her presence. And because of the amount of times that her episode was shared after bumping you to #2, the audience has grown, and so I'm proud to say that #3 right now is the recently released episode from the National Writers Series.
Wow.
But I didn't come up here for shameless self-promotion, and I see you over there, and Holly will stop me if I start talking too long. So, because there was so many things that I want to respond to that you said that like I really want to mention how much I relate to things such as you start talking extras in your Netflix series, and it's reminding me of a recent casting call that happened down in Little River, and I read through it, and I was all excited, and then realized after decades of non-tribals playing tribal members in movies, the only role that I saw fit for me to try out for would be the balding Caucasian man. So, middle-aged bald. But you said Louise Erdrich is an idol of yours, and I've read some of her series, and in not by release date, but more by like time period. So starting with Tracks and coming through Love Medicine, which when I see like Love Medicine in the Bingo Palace, to me in my lifetime, being, for those that don't know me, I'm the vice chair of the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. Woo! And in 1980 was when our tribe was reaffirmed as a federally recognized tribe. And so seeing some of these advances in her books, like really, I had this great connection to the era And not only that, but her ability to make a tribal-centric novel that isn't tribal exclusive, if you know what I mean. Like it really paints the scene. I really felt like she could have been talking about Peshabi Town, Sutton's Bay, Keewaydin, and but it stops around that era, around Indian gaming, and I noticed that Firekeeper's daughter kind of picks up around just after that, and carries on into like modern times and has a solid depiction of that. And I think it's got to resonate well, not just because you're a Sioux tribal member, but because for those who don't know, the Sioux Ste. Marie tribe goes on lineage. They're not exclusive to blood quantum, so they allow anybody that's been related down to be enrolled in the tribe. And in our tribe as well, we have several people that have, we have people with white skin, black skin, Asian. They're still tribal members. They're as enrolled citizens. Was that a conscious effort to like kind of follow in her footsteps when you made it? I'm trying to find the words for like inclusive of all and not just inclusive of Native Americans.
I really wanted Daunis to be unenrolled in the beginning of the story. I wanted to take that story there. I wanted to talk about Indigenous identity and the role of like having that card, how that defines us. And then I wanted to have the reader see that change and how it applies to different characters in the story. Daunis's brother is a tribal member and arguably has very little contact or very little connection to the culture. But yet he is heralded as this great representative of the community because he plays hockey and he's visibly Native. I wanted to get into things like Daunis and her friend Lily call it the acceptable Anishinaabe skin tone continuum. And it was what they referred to as this skin tone continuum and people who land on its outer edges. So Daunis is very light-skinned like myself. Her friend Lily is darker skinned, and that they both have to deal with different kinds of BS, but just flip sides of it. I guess I wanted to give that voice to our teens, our students, our young people who might feel like, wait, am I, like, how Native am I? But I don't look like this, or I don't look like that, or people are, if I had $1 for every time someone said, oh, you don't look Native, or, oh, but you're not like one of them, like, I'd be rich. Just that. And so I wanted to delve into that identity and what makes us Native. And honestly, I feel like if our young people, as early as possible, if they can claim their Native identity, know their belonging and place in their community, I feel like that gives them sturdy shoulders to withstand whatever comes to them. And I wish I had it when I was younger. I probably didn't have it until I was well into my 20s. And so, yeah, that's who I wanted to reach with the book.
I love you so much for doing that. Thank you so much, Chimagwech.
Oh, Chimagwech.
And another plug, Shabby Town Powwow, third weekend in August. Everybody's
okay,
welcome.
so we have Sugar Island Powwow, third weekend in July, Shabby Town, third weekend in August. Okay.
And I do want to touch on two things really quick, and we have one more question, and then we have to wrap up. I do think the premise of addressing that skin tone continuum is universal. Through Title Track, I do a lot of racial equity training. Some of you have been there, thank you very much. And one of the things that I heard just today from what I call a multi-identitied person. So this person grew up in a Caucasian family but looks Asian because one of their parents is Asian. And they have that same question. You know, they have that same thing, and we see that with our Black community. We see that with a lot of different people. So I think when you're addressing arguably one of the communities that suffers the worst from that because of our blood quantum requirements, which nobody else in the country has to, it helps others. It goes to others. So thank you. And I'm going to do you one up because you came over here to self-promote. Miss Boulley, whose fashion are you wearing today?
I am wearing Jamie Akuma, a Native American designer. I support her wholeheartedly, and I will share.
Can't do that on a podcast.
Thank you.
All right, we've got one more question.
Hi, my name is Andrea, and this has been so inspiring. I adored Firekeeper's Daughter. I listened to Isabella's narration of it, and it was so sweet to hear you talk about selecting her. You mentioned that when you were 18, you had first felt somewhat seen in a book, but that there were a lot of rough stereotypes in that. Do you have a memory of the first book that you read that you really, truly felt seen as an Ojibwe woman in? Or if not the first, one that you really did feel seen by?
Probably Love Medicine by Louise Erdrich. That probably was like the first where I was like, okay, I'm here. I know these people. Yeah, that probably was my first.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing, and I want to check out that podcast, so thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. So in closing, I want to share another quote. This is Ashley Bailey of Heart and Soul Books. She posted, "I am nearing the end of this novel, and I'm not ready for it to end." And I think many of us feel the same way and can't wait to see what you do next. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, my phenomenal deal with Macmillan was for 2 books. I have 4 books in mind, but the deal is 2 books. If book 1 was Indigenous Nancy Drew or Indigenous Veronica Mars, the book I'm working on now is Indigenous Lara Croft, except instead of raiding tombs, the main character is raiding museums for our ancestors. Their bones and sacred items that are just lodged in archives of museums, and she wants to bring them home. And in the course of one of her heists, things go very badly.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait.
Yes.
Can't wait. I'm a fan of, I used to do some work with NAGPRA, so I love that. And we have to talk.
Yep.
So I might have some
NAGPRA.
material for you.
Okay.
Everybody, I want to say Chimiigwech Naitra to Miss Angeline Boulley.
Oh,
Here's everybody.
thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Miigwech, to everybody who has loved the book, bought the book, read the book, reviewed it, rated, recommended it. It all makes such a huge difference. Support Indigenous authors. We have so many incredible stories to tell.
Miigwech. Good night, everybody. Have a safe drive home.